Imagine you wake up tomorrow and your money is still there. Your bank app still shows the same balance, your paycheck still lands, and the world looks normal from the outside. Then you walk into a grocery store, pick up a few basics, and your stomach drops. The number on your screen hasn't changed, but what that number can buy has collapsed. That moment is what currency failure feels like for regular people. Not a movie, not a headline, a quiet, personal shock at the checkout counter. It's the realization that you did everything right and the rules changed anyway, faster than your life could adapt. And here's what scares me the most. This isn't a once-in-history freak event. It has happened to modern countries with banks, universities, hospitals, and stable institutions. It happened in Germany in the early 1920s, in Zimbabwe in the 2000s, in Venezuela in the 2010s, and in Lebanon in the 2020s. Different places, different politics, different cultures, and yet the same pattern. Trust breaks. Money stops working the way you expect, and everyday people pay the price. Today I'm going to show you the pattern in plain English, then walk you through 5 categories of assets that have repeatedly held value when currencies crack, and 2 that usually get crushed. This is educational, not financial advice. I'm not here to scare you into a bunker. I'm here to help you think clearly, because panic is expensive and preparation is calm. Now, picture Berlin in late 1923. A loaf of bread costs not hundreds, not thousands, but billions of marks. Prices changed so fast that waiting in a line could mean paying more by the time you reached the counter. The exchange rate spiraled into the trillions of marks per dollar, and the currency became a joke nobody could laugh at. When a currency collapses, life doesn't instantly turn into chaos. People still work, kids still go to school, and families still try to make dinner. What changes is the invisible background pressure. Everyone starts thinking, should I spend my money now because it'll be worth less later? That mental shift changes everything. It speeds up spending, it reduces saving, it pushes people into weird behaviors that look irrational until you realize the money itself is malfunctioning. And this malfunction tends to follow a sequence you can recognize. First, the government spends more than it collects for a long time. That can be war, recession, corruption, natural disasters, political promises, or just steady mismanagement. Second, it fills the gap with borrowing and money creation, sometimes openly, sometimes through policies that amount to the same thing. Third, prices rise faster than wages, and people feel poorer even if their paycheck number goes up. Fourth, people flee to alternatives, anything that holds value better than the local currency. Fifth, trust breaks completely and the currency stops behaving like money, even if it's still legal tender on paper. That sequence is recognizable. The timing is the tricky part. Some countries limp along for years before the break. Others snap fast. But once you see the late stages, behavior changes quickly, and the people who have options do better than the people who don't. So, what holds value when money doesn't? Let's talk about 5 categories, starting with the classic one that people love to debate: gold and silver, precious metals. Are they magical? No. Are they perfect? No. But they have one job, and they've done it for a long time. They are hard to create out of thin air, and they sit outside the promise system that paper money relies on. When trust in money breaks, people rush toward things that can't be printed. That's why central banks still hold gold. That's why regular people keep buying it during inflation scares. Gold isn't exciting, and that's kind of the point. It doesn't need a CEO. It doesn't need a business plan. It's just there. Now, gold can swing in the short term. In a real panic, everything can sell off because everyone needs cash at once. But historically, when the dust settles, precious metals often reassert themselves as a store of value because they don't depend on the local currency being respected. If you're thinking clearly, precious metals are not a get-rich strategy. They're an insurance policy. You hold insurance not because you love paying for it, but because you don't want one event to wipe you out. The second category is foreign hard currency. If your domestic currency is failing, the simplest escape valve is holding a currency that isn't failing at the same time. People sometimes treat this like a political statement, but it's usually just survival math. In currency crises, communities often start pricing major items in a stable foreign unit. Rent, cars, imported goods, medical procedures, and tuition all start getting quoted in the real money. Even if the local currency is still used for small transactions, the public quietly votes with its wallet. Lebanon is a modern example that still hurts to talk about because it happened to regular workers who thought their savings were safe. When confidence in the banking system and the peg broke, people who held savings only in local currency saw their purchasing power collapse. Meanwhile, anyone who had stable currency outside the system preserved far more of their options. This is not because any foreign currency is perfect. It's because in a crisis you don't need perfect, you need stable enough. A lifeboat doesn't have to be beautiful, it just has to float. The third category is the one that surprises people: productive businesses and equities. Many assume that if a country is in trouble, stocks go to zero. Sometimes that happens, especially if markets shut down or property rights get violated. But often, something counterintuitive happens first. Stock prices can rise in local currency terms during high inflation. That sounds insane until you remember what a share represents. A share is a slice of a real business with real assets, inventory, land, equipment, and cash flows. When currency units become worth less, it takes more of them to represent the same underlying value. But not all companies survive equally. Businesses that earn only in the collapsing currency and rely heavily on imported inputs can get crushed. Their revenues lose real value while their costs explode. On the other hand, companies that export, earn in hard currency, or have strong pricing power can sometimes hold value better because their cash flow can reprice with reality. The principle here is simple. Cash flows that can move with the real world tend to do better than cash flows trapped in a broken unit. This is why many long-term investors prefer diversified exposure across regions and currencies rather than being all in on one fragile system. The fourth category is not glamorous, but it matters in the acute phase: essentials and barter goods. When formal money stops functioning smoothly, trade doesn't stop. Trade gets messy. People fall back on goods that are immediately useful: food, water, fuel, medicine, hygiene supplies, batteries, basic tools. During extreme disruption, even small standardized items can become informal currency because people trust usefulness more than they trust paper. There are historical cases where cigarettes functioned as money in black markets and in highly constrained wartime economies. The reason is not romance or rebellion, it's practicality. They were divisible, portable, widely desired, and relatively consistent in quality. But here's the limit. Essentials are tactical, not strategic. You consume them, they spoil, they take space. You can't build a long-term store of wealth out of soap and batteries, but you can build short-term resilience that helps you function when payments freeze or shelves empty. In other words, essentials are survival liquidity. They help you get through the moment when systems are glitching and everyone is improvising. The fifth category is productive land, especially land that produces food. Human beings can live without a lot of things, but they cannot live without calories. That's why productive land has held fundamental value across long periods of history. During hard times, people who can produce food often have more options than people who can only consume. A garden, livestock, a reliable source of water, or farmland can change the entire story of a family under stress. But land has real risks. It's not portable, it's illiquid. You can't move it if politics deteriorate. It can be taxed aggressively, and it can hide. In some countries and some periods, property rights have been violated, and landowners have learned that ownership can become a fragile word. So I don't treat land as a magic shield. I treat it as a real asset with real benefits and real political risk. The principle still stands. Assets tied to necessities tend to retain real-world value better than assets that depend on a stable currency agreement. Now let's talk about what tends to get destroyed, because this is where people who played it safe can get blindsided. The first big loser is fixed income in the collapsing currency. Bonds, treasury notes, anything where your return is a promise to pay you later in the same unit that is being devalued. If the unit collapses, your claim gets paid back in cheap money. Fixed income is built for stability. If stability disappears, fixed income becomes a trap. Even if the government honors the payment, the purchasing power can be gone. The second big loser is savings trapped inside a failing banking system in the local currency. This is the nightmare scenario people don't take seriously until it happens. You saved for years. You followed the rules. Then withdrawals are restricted, the currency is devalued, or the system changes the terms, and your number stays the same while your buying power dies. This is why diversification is not just about investment returns. It's about avoiding single points of failure. If all your savings depend on one currency and one banking system behaving perfectly, that's concentration risk disguised as safety. So, are there warning signs today? Here's where I'm careful. I'm not here to predict dates. I'm not here to scream that everything is about to explode. But I am saying this: debt levels, political incentives, and monetary policy choices create pressures that show up in human behavior. When people lose trust, they do obvious things. They rush into hard assets. They rush into foreign currency. They move savings outside the system. They speed up spending. They avoid long-term contracts priced in the weakening currency. They price real goods in a stable unit, even if it's unofficial. Those behaviors matter more than speeches, because speeches are cheap and behavior is expensive. If you want a calm, practical framework, here it is. 1. Diversify across asset types and jurisdictions if you can. Don't let your entire financial life depend on one currency, one government, and one banking system. 2. Prefer assets that can reprice with reality, like certain businesses, certain real assets, and diversified exposure beyond a single fragile economy. 3. Keep a small layer of real-world resilience. Emergency liquidity. Backup payment methods. A reasonable buffer of essentials. Not panic hoarding, just basic preparedness so you're not fragile. 4. Don't confuse numbers with value. Currency collapse is what happens when society discovers that numbers can lie. The skill is learning to measure your wealth in purchasing power, not in digits. Now let me give you my honest opinion. Most people don't get wiped out because they're stupid. They get wiped out because they trusted the wrong thing. They trusted that money is just a neutral tool, always stable, always fair, always reliable. But money is a social agreement. It's shared trust. It's a promise that this paper or this digital balance will buy real things tomorrow. When that promise breaks, the damage isn't just economic, it's personal. It's parents who can't provide. It's retirees watching decades of saving turn into trivia. It's working professionals feeling poor overnight, even though they did nothing wrong. And yes, that makes me angry. Regular people often pay the price for decisions they didn't make and systems they didn't design. That's why I believe the right response isn't panic. It's dignity. It's options. It's building a life where no single failure scenario can erase everything you worked for. You don't need to be extreme. You don't need to be paranoid. You just need to be honest about how the world has worked in the past. Currencies fail. Systems change. And the people who prepare early do it quietly, calmly, and without drama. If this video helped you see the pattern more clearly, subscribe to Simple Financial Insight. That's what we do here. We take big, scary money stories and translate them into simple, practical understanding. And if you've ever looked at the economy and thought, I don't fully trust this, you're not crazy, you're paying attention. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.